Hi everyone, I'm Gertie and welcome back to my online Lamour Dress class. If you haven't seen the previous segments of this class, please do go ahead and catch up on those. And to catch you up on what we're doing here, this is the Lamour Dress class that was previously on my Charm School site. It was a paid course. In light of current world events, I am releasing it to you free of charge. I want you to enjoy it. I want you to stay home and sew. So please enjoy the class. Also know that a lot has changed about the pattern since I released this class. We've now released it in sizes 2 through 20 with A through H cup sizes, as well as adding new design elements. So check it out, buy the pattern on the Charm site, subscribe to my channel, subscribe to me on Patreon, stay healthy, stay safe, and stay home and sew. And I'll see you soon. We're ready to sew our zippers. So grab your zipper, grab your dress. Let's go to the ironing board. We're going to be pressing those back zipper openings. Okay. So here I am at the ironing board. I'm going to be pressing the right side as I look at it. Now remember, this is the underlap side. This is going to be pressed under 1/2 inch all the way down. The same amount that we pressed it open at the top in those tricky steps that we did a few chapters back. The left side, as you're looking at it, it's the overlap side. That is going to be pressed 5/8 of an inch under all the way down. So let me just kind of isolate this here. I'm going to open this. And you can kind of get rid of the lining here. It's not important at this stage. And you're going to press this in 1/2 inch. And one cool little trick that I've learned is that at the waistline, this can get kind of bulky to have both these seam allowances on top of each other. So one thing you can do is at where this fusible interfacing ends, you can do a clip here. And then you can press this open just for this small section. The rest of it is pressed up as usual. And now when we press this in, it's much thinner under there because you don't have so many seam allowances on top of each other. So 1/2 inch all the way down. And if you've ever sewn a lap zipper before, then you know that these are just the standard measurements for a lap zipper. So 1/2 inch on the underlap side, 5/8 of an inch on the overlap side. Now the only place this is a little funny, and this is by design for the lap zipper, is at the base here, because from the zipper mark down, we stitch this at 5/8 of an inch, but we're now going to press this at 1/2 inch. So there's going to be the tiniest little 1/8 of an inch underlap down here, and that's what we're going for, because that's going to help hide the zipper underneath there. So you do want to make sure that you have that little weird little underlap at the bottom, 1/8 of an inch. I'm just going to double check my measurements here. Looks good. Okay, and I'm going to press the other side, 5/8 of an inch. Okay, and it's going to be easiest here if I do this kind of upside down from the last thing I did. So again, I'm just going to snip into the skirt seam allowance where the fusible interfacing ends, and I'm going to press that open, that seam allowance open from there, but it's going to be pressed up as usual over here. So, and then this whole thing gets pressed in 5/8 of an inch. All the way down. And this fusible interfacing width is very handy in this one little spot because it's 1.25 inches, which is 5/8 of an inch doubled. So you can just double up that stabilizer tape right there and you'll know that you're 5/8 of an inch. Okay, next thing we're going to do is I'm going to find a nice flat surface and we're going to pin the zipper in on the underlap side, and then we'll stitch it, and then we're going to pin it in on the overlap side and then stitch that. So we're going to do this in a few stages. I've laid out my dress on a nice flat surface here, and I've just completely flipped the lining out so that it's out of the way. I've got my zipper ready to go, and I'm going to start by pinning it to the underlap side. Okay, so what you're going to do on the underlap side is pin. You're just going to place this side, this seam allowance, and just place it right on top of the zipper tape. And you're going to start pinning like so. Okay, with the heads of the pins towards you. And I'm placing this, there's the fold that we just pressed in, and that fold should be just to the right of the zipper teeth. Okay, so I'm only pinning through the seam allowances and then through the zipper, so make sure that you're not actually pinning the other side of your dress here. Tuck that zipper tape in. And I'm just going to pin it all the way down like this. So again, just positioning that fold so it's just next to the zipper teeth. And this is the easy side of a lap zipper, so I feel like it's nice that it goes first because it's kind of like a little warm-up for the other side. Okay, now when I get down to the base of the zipper opening here, this is where I should have that little 1/8 of an inch underlap. All right, so I'm just going to kind of make sure that that stays folded the way it's supposed to. And the way that I sew my zippers is that I never baste, I just pin and then stitch, and then pin and then stitch. So a lot of people like to baste first by hand, and if you have a difficult fabric, that can be the way to go if there's a lot of stretch in your fabric or something like that. But I've done so many of these at this point, and I feel like practice really makes perfect with this. And you're definitely going to get to a point where you can just pin it, stitch it, pin it, stitch it. Okay, so I'm going to open my zipper halfway. I'm going to change my foot to my zipper foot, and then we're going to start sewing. So I'm using my zipper foot now, and I've positioned the needle correctly. And this gets a little funny because you have the boned bodice here. You just kind of have to just shove it through the opening of your machine here. And you're going to start at the top of the zipper, and you want to stitch right on that fold of fabric, right next to your fold. So I'm going to lower my needle, remove that first pin, and I'm going to start stitching. Back stitch. Okay, and here, you know, hand position is so important with sewing zippers. I really like to pull is not the right word. I really like to hold the fabric taut from both the front and the back. So it helps if you can kind of grab from here and then also from the front and keep everything really nice and smooth. And because one of the biggest issues, and sometimes I use my hand to just smooth out like this too. One of the biggest issues with sewing zippers is puckers. So this will eliminate puckers as much as possible. Okay, so again, I'm just stitching right on that fold right here, but next to the zipper teeth. And one thing I'm just really being mindful of is keeping the fabric smooth on the bed of the machine here. If it starts to come forward like this, that's when you start to get ripples. So keep everything nice and smooth. I'm getting close to my zipper pull now, so I'm going to stop with my needle down. I'm going to lift up my presser foot, and I'm just going to close the zipper all the way again. So now the pull is out of the way. And just keep stitching until you get to the base where you've pinned. This is where I feel like that little underlap always tries to fold in on itself. So sometimes I'll need to go back and just make sure that I've got that little 1/8 of an inch underlap. I'm just going to take a little moment here to reposition it. You can always stop when you're sewing. Just put your needle down before you lift up the presser foot. Okay, now I'm going to backstitch now that I'm at the bottom. Great, we've completed the underlap side. So next thing I'm going to do is just lay this all out flat again. Very important in the pinning stages of sewing a lap zipper that you're working flat. Never work on your lap or on like a ham or anything like that, or up in the air like this, because you will get wrinkles and things won't match up. So it's very important that you're working on a nice flat surface. So I'm just going to get to my surface and then we're going to pin the overlap side of the zipper. I'm laying this out again on a flat surface so that I can pin the overlap side. And what I want you to do, promise me you'll do this, is start pinning at the waistline seam, okay? So you're gonna take this seam allowance that you pressed under 5/8 of an inch, you're gonna match it to the waistline seam on the other side, and you just want this fold to just cover the line of stitching that you just did on the underlap side. And you're going to pin to the left of the zipper teeth, okay? Very important that you're pinning to the left of the zipper teeth through both seam allowances and through the zipper tape. I have my hand, I've put it inside the dress like this so that I'm not pinning all the way to the other layer. And for people who are sewing this type of zipper for the first time, the mistake that I see most often is that you accidentally place your pin on this side of the teeth. It feels intuitive for some reason to close up that gap, but then you don't have an overlap here, okay? So if you want to just kind of test yourself that you're doing it right, lift up this flap, and that is our zipper overlap, and that's why it's a lap zipper. So after we pin this, you should still be able to open and close the zipper as normal. Okay, so what I'm going to do, there's a very specific order I like to do this in, and that's to pin the waistline first, and then pin down to the base of the zipper opening. Then we'll go to the neckline and finish the pinning down to the waistline. Okay, so from here, I'm going to go down to the base of the zipper opening. And again, I'm pinning to the left of the zipper teeth. I'm making sure that my fold just covers my last line of stitching, and then I'm pinning through those layers to the left of the teeth. And at this point, if you need to open the zipper a little bit to help you out, you can, because you need to kind of get in between the layers here. And at the very base of the zipper, where your seam opens, and from here down it's just skirt seam, you're going to place a horizontal pin like this, because we're going to do a pivot here and some horizontal stitching to hold the zipper in place. So I just like to put that pin there to remind myself that that's where that happens. Okay, close the zipper now, and now we're going to go back up to the neckline. And it gets a little bit dicey here because you have to cover the pull and it's bulky. So just do your best here. You want to make sure that you're pinned again to the left of the pull and the teeth, and that your flap isn't, your seam allowance isn't flapping open underneath there. Okay, and now we're going to kind of fill in this area with pins from the top of the bodice down to the waistline. I've noticed in my workshops, one thing that can happen is that people think that their seams don't match here, but that's because they didn't follow this order that I found works really well, starting at the waistline and then pinning down, going back to the neckline and then pinning to the waistline. If you just try to pin from the top down to the bottom or the bottom up to the top, it happens fairly often that it seems like your seams don't match there. But you really, this is a matter of pinning at key points and then distributing from there. Okay. Now, one thing that's always weird about the overlap side on a lap zipper is that because of the pull, the bulkiness of the pull, now this zipper, this side of the zipper is kind of veering slightly out. And so you can have your stitching veer slightly out, but I like to correct this slightly and move it in just a little bit. Move the zipper tape in on the left side a little bit. And that might mean that you have a little bit more bumpiness under the zipper pull, but I would actually prefer that than to have a real crooked line of stitching. That's just my personal preference. You kind of have to choose one or the other on a lap zipper. Okay, so we've pinned the entire thing and we're ready to top stitch the left side, which is the overlap side. So we're gonna go back to the machine. For this next section that we're top stitching, you want to make sure that your zipper is open all the way down to the bottom. And we still have our zipper foot on, and now the type of zipper foot that I have, I need to adjust the needle. So sometimes you have to actually adjust the foot to be on a different side of the needle, but mine I adjust the needle. So I adjusted it to the other side. And again, I'm stitching from the top to the bottom. In this method, you always stitch the zipper from the top to the bottom. Don't turn the dress around. Okay. And my top stitching should be at 3/8 of an inch. So I'm kind of finding a mark over on my needle plate here to help me with this seam allowance. And remember, if you've moved your needle, then these lines will have changed in relationship to the needle. So you might want to just use a clear ruler to double check yourself here. Okay, I'm going to start stitching. At the top of this side, I tend to use the hand wheel a little bit just because there is a metal stop under there. Okay, and we are going to stitch at 3/8 of an inch all the way down. The zipper teeth should be between the needle and the fold over here, just the way we pinned it. And again, just talking about avoiding puckers and wrinkles and all that stuff, I'm being very careful to keep one hand over here and keeping things smooth. And it's also important to not let the weight of the skirt drag this down too much. So at some points you might see me moving the skirt up a little bit so that I don't have any drag lines coming down from the needle, which is what can create ripples. And if I ever see a ripple start to form, I will just lift the presser foot, smooth under the needle. Make sure to keep the needle down. Go, just getting rid of a little ripple there. And at this point, the skirt lining should be free. Remember, we worked in those flaps over there, so I'm just going to kind of keep them out of the way. You don't want to catch any of the lining at this point. We're going to hand stitch it in the next step. Okay, now you can see that I'm getting close to the end here. The zipper pull is down here. I'm going to go as far as I can without closing the zipper. So about there. And then I'm going to stop with the needle down, lift the presser foot, and I'm going to close the zipper here. And you kind of got to rearrange everything under the foot here. And this is where this gets a little scary because for about 3/4 of an inch, I don't have a seam line guide here. I'm just going blind, and that can be exciting for some people. I like the adrenaline of it. Other people prefer to mark this in before they start, but I find it fairly simple to just kind of based on my previous stitching, continue in a hopefully straight line. Got a little bit of a ripple down there. And now I've reached where the seam line opens here. or closes, I guess, however you want to think about it. I'm going to lower my needle, I'm going to lift my presser foot, and I'm going to pivot so that now I'm stitching horizontally across the base of the zipper. And I'm going to back stitch here, just a couple stitches. Okay, and the end of my zipper is actually about down here. The zipper opening is a little bit less than 18 inches, so you shouldn't be dealing with a zipper stop or anything down here, and or worrying about stitching over metal at this point. So that's our completed zipper. I'm just going to show you what it looks like all closed up, and then we're going to be able to move on. All right, we've got our zipper in. I'm just going to show you how it looks all finished. So I'm zipping up here. We've got the overlap on this side, our waistline seam matches, and here's the pull at the top. And that is your beautiful lap zipper. And here's that sort of L-shaped stitching at the bottom, which holds everything in place at the bottom. All right, so there's your lapped zipper. We're going to move on in the next chapter to, on the inside, you might have noticed that we have a lot of loose stuff going on in here. So in the next chapter, we're going to make everything look really beautiful on the inside by hand stitching all of that in place. We're ready now to start sewing the lining in by hand on the inside of the dress to create that clean finish. So I've laid out my dress here on this nice flat surface, and as you know, we've already turned under our seam allowance on the waistline of the bodice lining. So now I'm just going to kind of match up all these seam allowances here and pin in place all the way around the waistline. And then this is all going to be hand stitching. I hope you like hand sewing, because you're going to be doing a little bit of it here. So, or maybe you have a good TV show or movie lined up that you can watch while you're working on this. But once you put the boning in, this really is the best way to finish the waistline. So I prefer to do the hand stitching here. Okay, so I've pinned around there. I'm going to go back and pin from center to the other side of the waistline. And then we'll be ready to pin in the seam allowances around the zipper tape. Okay, so the waistline is pinned. Now this is where things get a little bit crazy. We have the zipper tape, the top of it up here, that just needs to get folded under and then tucked between the two layers, like that. Okay, and so the lining here is pressed in the same amount that the dress is pressed in, so should be 1/2 inch here. To be honest, I don't worry about measuring so much here. I just kind of fold it as I go and make sure that it's clearing the zipper teeth like it's supposed to. Okay, and here things get a little bit funny too, because we've got the skirt, and remember our flap here? So that's going to get stitched up like that. This needs to get turned in. All these edges need to get turned in so that they give us that clean finish. Okay, so I'm going to kind of pin in place as I go. There's that one. This one, it's like a little origami going on here. I'm going to fold that in. Make sure that everything matches up nicely. I'm going to redo this one real quick. Okay. There, that one's pinned in nicely now. And I'm going to keep pinning down the skirt here. Again, you can just kind of fold this under as you go. It doesn't have to be that real hard, pressed under, ironed crease here. We're going to be hand stitching this all down, so that looks good. I might just do one more pin right here. Just kind of secure that a little bit better. Okay, that side is nice and clean finished. I'm going to go back to the other zipper opening on this side. Again, I'm going to tuck in the zipper tail at the top, just kind of fold that in. You can see I have some basting along here, some machine basting from when I sewed the underlining layers together. So that can be removed later. Okay, and this side is folded under, again, the same amount as the dress was folded under at this point, which I believe, well, which I know was 7/8 of an inch. And then on the skirt, same thing. Let's just turn in. There's our flap at the waistline. And I hope you can see now how leaving that flap is helping us get a nice clean finish here. If we hadn't left that lining flap free for 2 inches, we wouldn't be able to manipulate this and turn it under to get our nice clean finish. So all of that was just for this moment. Down to the base of the zipper on this side. Okay, the whole thing is pinned, the lining, any free lining bits are now pinned in place. Now I'm going to start my hand stitching. So for hand stitching, I use just regular old thread from the machine, and I try to keep it to a length from my fingertip to about my elbow. That's a little bit long. To avoid tangling. And if you like to use beeswax, now is the point where you would coat this in beeswax and then melt it in a press cloth. I found that I feel like if I just keep my thread lengths short enough, I can minimize tangling that way. So I'm not going to use beeswax, but I'm going to thread my needle and knot it. Okay, I'm going to start stitching from the top over here, and on this side I just kind of come up through the zipper tape. I came up through the zipper tape, and now I'm just going to grab a little bite of the zipper tape over here and then tunnel a little bit through the fold. And this, what we're doing here is a slip stitch. Again, I'm just taking a little bite of the zipper tape, coming through the fold of the lining and pulling the needle through. Okay, so it's essentially a stitch in 2 steps. That little bite that's just through the zipper tape, and then the tunnel through on just the lining. So we're sewing one layer to another. Okay, and we're going to keep going like this with our little bite, which is right next to our last stitch, and then we're going to tunnel through the lining. Okay, little bite, and then tunnel through the lining. Okay, so I'm going to continue this. I'm going to go down to the base of the zipper on this side, and I'm going to stop there, and then I'm going to restart on the other side. I don't like to anchor it too much at the base of the zipper over here, so just one side, stop, and then do the other side, and then I'm going to go all along the waistline seam. So we've got our work cut out for us here. I'm just going to keep hand stitching, and I hope you have a good podcast, maybe a nice cup of tea, and this should be done in no time. Okay, you can see I've hand stitched the lining completely in on the inside of the dress, so we have this nice clean finish. It's stitched around the zipper tape and then also around the waistline using that slip stitch. And we're going to move on to the next chapter, which is all about hemming your dress. So we're so close to finishing now. I just want to warn you now that you're going to want to hang your dress for at least 24 hours before we get to the next stages. This is a very flared skirt, so it has those bias portions of the skirt that are going to kind of stretch out overnight. So you do want to hang it. So do that now, and then when we come back in the next chapter, I will show you how to even up the hem from the ground. And then we'll get to hemming.